Welcome to Orthodox Christian Theology. This is Craig Trulli, and with me today is Mark Clark. How are we doing today?
Good morning, Craig. It's good to be here with you.
Now, my question for you is why you couldn't break through the Gustav line as quick as you should have.
Break through the Gustav line.
Oh, you're not the real Mark Clark. The Gustav line. Albert Kesselring, and all that fun stuff.
Well, that was my great-grandfather. He did his best.
I see. So, anyway, the reason Mark Clark's with us today, because we're going to be talking about the papal blessing of same-sex couples, fiducia supplicans. How do we pronounce that?
Fiducia supplicans. This is the highest level Catholic document that can be that they put out. It's an update to a previous document looking at blessings for civil unions, and there's a debate over whether it's a step forward or if it's a change at all to the doctrine of the Catholic Church on homosexual unions.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're pretty much going to read the whole thing, offer commentary that is of a specific nature of interpretation with this document. I'm going to say from the onset, and we might be very different about this, Mark, is for the Roman Catholic apologists, this document doesn't offer a real problem. There's so many epistemic outs, so to say, that they could take, that it's not infallible, it's not ex cathedra, it's just disciplinary, the categories are right, all these different things that they say, all's well, nothing to see here. I think the more profound issue is without this epistemic shell game where we actually buy into this stuff and we just accept it for what it is. This is something that would have never been acceptable within the first millennium papacy. And a lot of that's detailed in my book about what really was that papacy in the first millennium. But we'll be really making that connection, how it kind of get off the rails in the end. I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of what this document is about. So maybe before we read it, is there any more of an introduction you would like to give about the document, or you just want to jump right into it?
Well, I think you're right there, Craig, that there's something for everyone on all sides of this issue to agree with this in this document, but we'll also see that there's something for everyone to disagree with. So let's get into it.
All right, so I'm sharing screen, and what we have is Declaration Fiducia Supplicans on the pastoral meaning of, and I hope I just didn't go to the bottom of the document, which of course I did, on the pastoral meaning of blessings. And so what we're going to see is they pretty much make this argument that blessings are good. People want good things. They can receive a blessing. And the exact intent of the individual is sort of irrelevant. This isn't completely wrong, but there's aspects where it is wrong, and this is where it becomes problematic. So let's read the beginning. He says, the text of declaration was submitted to the Holy Father for his review, and he approved it with his signature. Right? So this is not something taught by the Pope ex cathedra per se. I mean, I'm not even sure if the Roman apologists would say him reading the document and signing it is technically ex cathedra, but speaking normally, the Pope read this and he accepted it. All right, and he approved it, and this publicly went out on the Vatican website, Vatican periodicals. This is what we approve of. All right, so it continues. While the subject matter, and by the way, Mark, whenever you want to interrupt, please go right ahead. While the subject matter of this document was being studied, the Holy Father's response to the dubia of some cardinals was made known. That response provided important clarifications for this reflection and represents a decisive element for the work of the diastery. Since the Roman Curia is primarily an instrument to serve a successor Peter, our work must foster, along with understanding the Church's perennial doctrine, the reception of the Holy Father's teaching. All right.
So this dicastery, it's the Holy Sees, so the Catholic Church's dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. This group is the group that looks at church doctrine. And so this group is putting out an update. We'll see a little further an innovation to previously held doctrine.
Now, what we can say about this, and people can see my notes below, is that the Pope did not know enough about this or rubber stamped it by mistake, right? So, like the idea that, like, well, Pope Honorius might have not known exactly what he's reading, or it was translated wrong, or the plethora of excuses that Anastasius the librarian made for him, or like with Pope Vigilius, he was thinking these documents are Chalcedonian, so he made an error in fact, and all these excuses that are made. It comes down to it is he read this, he agreed with it, he understood it. I just want people to understand that is the context behind this. As I already said at the beginning, I don't think this changes the world for the Roman Catholic apologists, but for a normal human being, it's something they should be aware of because I do think that's highly relevant. So we continue. As with the Holy Father's above mentioned response, the dubia of two cardinals, this declaration remains firm on the traditional doctrine of the Church about marriage, not allowing any type of liturgical rite or blessing similar to a liturgical rite that can cause or create confusion. All right, so I presume, being that you put the color green here, Mark, that you want to make a comment about this, because then I'll make my
own. Yes, this is a long document, I think 11 pages. To simply say we're allowing blessings of same-sex couples. The reason it's 11 pages is because they take all sides of the issue, and throughout this document, you'll see frequently the word confusion. They say, lest we cause confusion for risk of confusion. And if you look at the news and you look at Catholic apologists on this document, one thing that that apologists are saying is that this document has created a lot of confusion. I think that was foreseen here by the writers.
Now, I don't want to be a jerk, in all honesty, but being that papal lawyering is a real thing, there are papal lawyers, and we have their, I would say, aspiring defenders among the Roman Catholic apologists. We have to read this very legalistically. I work with law, and so what's the meaning of these words, and how could they be bent to kind of change what it looks like it's saying? So I just want to point out something here. The intent does seem to be that, because if you keep reading the document, that you can't like make the blessing of a irregular, which could be any sort of union, which we'll talk about, or a homosexual union, look like it's a gay marriage. What they don't want people doing, it sounds like anyway, is stepping into the Roman Catholic Church and seeing something that can be confused as a sacramental marriage. Right? That I would say is clearly the intent of this document, and I'm very much a believer in reading any sort of source and adequately trying to discern the intent of the author. I think that's relevant. Apparently, I'm the only person in apologetics that does, but I'm going to apply that here too. That's clearly the intent of this document, is that what they are condoning and actually encouraging, as we'll get into, are blessings that would look markedly different than anything of a sacramental nature. Now, that being said, though, being that people, like I said, I'm the only person apparently in apologetics that cares about intent when interpreting documents. If we don't care about intent, this, because it says can create confusion, kind of says, well, non-confusing ones are technically permissible. So keep that in mind. This could be reinterpreted in the future to allow for a liturgical rite, which is not confusing. And so that is something that I find very interesting, that door being left open, whether intentional or not. But being that they know this is precisely how they use language, I would not be very surprised. When lawyers draw contracts, they're actually very careful with wording because they know how these things could be intended to mean one thing and be mishandled in another. So it does look like that non-confusing liturgical rites and blessings similar to a liturgical rite could be permissible. Now, that being said, the document continues. The value of this document, however, is that it offers a specific and innovative contribution to the pastoral meaning of blessings, right? It's not claiming to be giving a apostolic, something that the apostles would recognize. Remember, in Roman Catholicism, doctrinal development is okay, right? It could be something the apostles would never dream would ever occur, quite frankly. So quite transparently, this is innovative. And just so people are aware of what it means about blessings, is they're given an interpretation as to what morally can be blessed. Okay, so keep that in mind. Permitting a broadening and enrichment of the classical understanding of blessings, which is closely linked to a liturgical perspective. Such theological reflection based on the pastoral vision of Pope Francis implies a real development from what has been said about blessings in the magisterium and the official text of the church. This explains why this text can be taken on the typology of the declaration. It is precisely in this context that one can understand the possibility of blessing couples and irregular and same-sex couples without officially validating their status or changing in any way the church's perennial teaching on marriage. All right, so they're going to traditionally affirm marriage between a man and woman, but they're going to now leave this door open where you could bless these sinful relationships. And I'm going to make in the case, like it says in Isaiah 5:20, how can we say evil is good and good is evil? This is something that should be off the table for Christians. And what we're seeing here is when people now adopt an epistemology, which allows you to take something evil and twist into good, and it's technically not wrong, it really makes you wonder, is that what the promise in Matthew 16:18 is all about? That we could, the church hasn't failed because on some epistemic basis, they didn't do something wrong, even though what they are doing is completely evil and wrong, but technically not wrong. Is that what the promise of Matthew 16:18 is about? Of course, no one in the first millennium would have thought this, and this is clearly what we see doing. So what is the spirit behind this epistemology? It's clearly not of God. And so we're going to get more into that, how this is calling something that's evil good. And that is the core of this issue, is scriptural. We cannot call evil good. This is something the prophet Isaiah warns against.
So what we looked at so far is the introductory letter that's written by Cardinal Fernando. Cardinal Fernando is the head of the dicastery for the doctrine of faith, and he's written the introduction. And the importance of this document is that it is the highest document within the Catholic Church that they can issue, and the dicaster of doctrine of faith, this is their first document that they've issued in the last 23 years. The last one was the Domian license document, which was issued in 2000.
All right.
So let's look at the introduction here.
So we're continuing with this document. So people know, I'm just trying to skip stuff that is really not totally relevant. A bunch of scriptural quotations at the beginning, which is very common in any sort of encyclicals and official ecclesiastical correspondence, if you're not aware. We'll start at the second paragraph. This, you pronounce dicastery, not Roman Catholics, I couldn't tell you. I've considered several questions of both a formal and informal nature about the possibility of blessing same-sex couples. And in light of Pope Francis' fatherly and pastoral approach, by the way, calling everything that is bad and clearly wrong, the face of it, pastoral, is a very common tactic of the modernists. It's sometimes what's pastoral is actually telling people what they ought not be doing so they don't go to hell, or they should be placing their faith in Christ, they should be repenting. That's what's actually pastoral. They should be getting baptizing their kids, not this stuff. But I continue. Of offering new clarifications on the responsum ad dubium. The above-mentioned responsum elicited numerous and varied reactions. It seems opportune to take up the theme again and offer a vision that draws together the doctrinal aspects with the pastoral ones in a coherent manner, because all religious teaching ultimately has to be reflected in the teacher's way of life, which awakens the assent of the heart by its nearest love and witness. A blessing in the sacrament of marriage. Pope Francis' recent responses to the second of the 5 questions posed by 2 cardinals offers an opportunity to explore this issue further, especially in its pastoral implications. It is a matter of avoiding that something that is not marriage is being recognized as marriage. Therefore, rites and prayers that could create confusion between what constitutes marriage and what is the exclusive, stable, and indissoluble union between a man and a woman, naturally open to the generation of children, and what contradicts it, are inadmissible. All right, so it looks like the point is said here is that, like I said before, this, whatever we're doing with blessings cannot be confused as actual sacramental marriage. They don't want that. But again, like I said before, how about those that don't create confusion, but differentiate matters, differentiate matters are technically permissible. So this leaves the door open where they can just more transparently endorse this stuff. And so there wouldn't be confusion because they're blessing that specifically instead of conflating it with marriage. So it's an interesting thing they leave the door open. I don't know if there's anything you want to add or you want to keep going.
Yeah, this document is in response to Belgium and Catholic bishops who are blessing same-sex unions. So they're pushing the issue and they're pushing the Pope to make a decision on it. In November 2022, all the Roman Catholic bishops in Belgium allowed blessing ceremonies for same-sex couples. And since May of 2021, over 100 Roman Catholic churches in Germany have been doing blessings of same-sex marriages. So this is, they haven't been shut down or told that they can't do that. But this document is implying we can't do marriages, we can just bless the couple. So it's taking a middle road between the more conservative and the more liberal elements of the church.
Now, they justify the traditional teaching here. It says this conviction is grounded in the perennial Catholic doctrine of marriage. It is only in this context that sexual relations find their natural, proper, and fully human meaning. The church's doctrine on this point remains firm, right? So just again, so people aware, they are not overturning the traditional teaching in marriage. They are adding to, right, what else could be blessed? What else is something that could be, someone could honor God and live in such a context? And so the question is, do they abrogate it in practice, but not word? Because I'm going to argue what we have written here is not going to abrogate the traditional meaning of marriage just by a purely legalistic, pharisaical reading. But the reality is, if you apply this, what is the result of this? And so we will continue on that note. This is also the understanding of marriage is offered by the gospel. For this reason, when it comes to blessings, the church has the right and the duty to avoid any rite that may contradict this conviction or lead to confusion, as we already discussed. Such is also the meaning of the responsum of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which states the church does not have the power to impart blessings on unions of persons of the same sex. It should be emphasized that in the rite of the sacrament of marriage, this concerns not just any blessing, but a gesture reserved to the ordained minister. In this case, the blessing given by the ordained minister is tied directly to the specific union of a man and a woman who establish an exclusive and indissoluble covenant by their consent. This fact allows us to highlight the risk of confusing a blessing given to any other union with the rite that is proper to the sacrament of marriage.
So the sacrament of marriage is the blessing of a union between a man and a woman. There's a risk here, this document is saying, that when we bless a couple with a homosexual union, it can be confused as being the same thing as marriage.
Yes, and so I would say the intent of this document, at least by word, is whatever is going to be done should not be confused as marriage. Now, the meaning of the various blessings. The Holy Father's above-mentioned response invites us to broaden and enrich the meaning of blessings. Blessings are among the most widespread and evolving sacramentals. Indeed, they lead us to grasp God's presence in all the events of life and remind us that even in the use of created things, human beings are invited to seek God, to love him, to serve him faithfully. For this reason, blessings have as their recipients people, objects of worship and devotion, sacred images, places of life, of work, suffering, fruits of the earth, human toil, all created realities that refer back to the Creator, praising and blessing him by their beauty, i.e.
And again, you see that legalistic wording here. Blessings are sacramentals, but later that we'll see in this document, a blessing is not a sacrament. It's a sacramental, not a sacrament.
So you see, from what we could see here also is that we can only bless positive things, but this is not said to be exclusive, right? So like they're only mentioning positive things here. And if you know anything, like if you're in the Orthodox Church, the priest will only bless something that is known to be positive. We will a little later get into what the church permits, like for some of these irregular situations, which do exist in Orthodoxy as well, not of a homosexual nature, at least on an institutional level. There's always problems at a local level. But what we see here, they don't say this is exclusive though. They just name positive things, but they fail to say you can only bless something that is that exclusively that it is felt to be intended towards the benefit of someone's salvation. Um, Now, like for example, anyone with a close spiritual father would know, like even if you're going to take a new job or buy a new house, you're technically supposed to ask for a blessing. I mean, no priest in their right mind is going to say no, but the idea is, what if they discern there's something actually bad about it, right?
So
And
what so what if my job is to be a bank robber and I'm worried because there's some risk involved. I go to the Orthodox priest, I say, "Hey, I'm just about to hold up a few banks. Can I get a blessing?"
they're not going to bless it, right? And you say, well, what if the profession is robbing, but it doesn't mean I'm going to rob anyone, or something like that, right? Like that, a normal human being's going to find that nuts. They're going to be like, listen, I'm not going to let you do that. And just for real nitty gritty, real world situations, like a priest might not bless you. I don't know, to go to a university to learn, get as, in Ethiopia, because they might feel spiritually, you might become Oriental Orthodox or something like that. And on the flip side of the coin, they might find that, no, you're very firm in your orthodoxy. We feel that you would do actually well going here. And so the intent behind it, as well as I would say the capacity of the person being blessed to respond positively to what they're asking to be blessed, is always considered in orthodoxy, and would have been considered in the Western church until we get these sort of radical modern developments. So anyway, the document continues. The liturgical meaning of the rite. Um, From a strictly liturgical point of view, a blessing requires that what is blessed be conformed to God's will as expressed in the teachings of the church. All right. So how do we do this with these irregular relationships? We'll see how the document explains itself. Indeed, blessings are celebrated by the virtue of faith and are ordered to the praise of God and the spiritual benefit of his people. As the Book of Blessings explains, so that this intent might become more apparent by an ancient tradition, the formulas of blessings are primarily, just want to point out, but not solely, aimed at giving glory to God for his gifts, asking for his favors, and straining the power of evil in this world. Right? So you can see, like, on paper, it's the same as the Orthodox, what blessings are used for. But we see they're trying to leave that door open where you could do something else with this. Therefore, those who invoke God's blessing through the church are invited to strengthen their dispositions through faith, for which all things are possible, and to trust in the love that urges, and I guess doesn't demand, the observance of God's commandments. This is why, while there's always and everywhere an opportunity to praise God through Christ and the Holy Spirit, apparently through even a homosexual relationship, according to this document, there's also a care to do with things, places, or circumstances that do not contradict the law of the Spirit of the gospel. Now, this I might think might be the most damaging part of this document, because it's saying, yeah, you could bless this, but it actually says there's also a care to do so with the things that do not contradict the law of the Spirit of the gospel. So by default, this document's saying you could bless a homosexual union because it does not contradict the law of the Spirit of the gospel. I think that's actually very scandalous.
Yeah, the condemnation of the document is in this document itself. The condemnation of confusion is throughout the document. The condemnation that this is a departure for the Pope from the spirit of the gospel is in the document. I think that's one of the fascinating aspects of this whole story.
Now, I know what Catholic Craig would say. People wondering, well, is there a way to salvage this? Simply, it would be that this allows for a couple to be blessed that are getting out, that are extricating themselves, or something like that, right? That wouldn't contradict the law or spirit of the gospel. But I'm going to argue as we continue on, the real Craig, that is, not the Catholic Craig, that that's not possible with a meth lab, with a homosexual relationship, with being a bank robber, the plethora of things that are just evil that you can ask to be blessed. And no matter all the legalese in the world to say, but it could be done in this non-evil way, it's just not possible. You can't bless a meth lab and make that good.
Now notice something particular about this phrasing. The last sentence not highlighted in that paragraph says, "This is a liturgical understanding of blessings." So a liturgical understanding of blessings would not allow this, but they're carving out a new section of blessings, which are
It's
not
not
liturgical.
liturgical. Yep. So, And that's another good point, because maybe Catholic Rite could even say, oh, well, that's true for liturgical blessings, but not for non-liturgical blessings. They could contradict the law and spirit of the gospel, which is extremely, extremely bizarre.
And here you'll see in this next paragraph, when a blessing is evoked on certain human relationships by a special liturgical rite, it is necessary that what is blessed corresponds to God's designs. Meaning that could be a young man and young woman who want a blessing because they're dating, or want a blessing because they're engaged, or want a blessing because they're married or marrying. But this is saying that only applies if it's liturgical. We can do a blessing of something that is not human relations within God's designs if it's non-liturgical.
All right, so we have, I'll just read that quickly. You gave the explanation, so I won't. Basing itself on these considerations, Congregation from the Doctrine of the Faiths, explanatory note, recalls that when a blessing is invoked on certain human relationships by a special liturgical rite, it is necessary that what is blessed corresponds with God's designs written in creation and fully revealed by Christ the Lord. For this reason, so I guess we don't have to for non-liturgical ones, for this reason, since the church has always considered only those sexual relations that are lived out within marriage to be morally illicit, the church does not have the power to confer its liturgical blessing when they would somehow offer a form of moral legitimacy to a union that presumes to be a marriage or an extramarital sexual practice, right? So they are here defending the traditional teaching liturgically.
Yes, because blessing these things would offer them moral legitimacy. That's why we can't bless same-sex couples, because we don't want to give it moral legitimacy. That's what the document's doing here.
So we see one must. So now we have a positive command, right? It's not should. Also avoid the risk of reducing the meaning of blessing to this point of view alone. So that right there is the doctrinal teaching in this document. It's saying this is not a matter of opinion. There is this different kind of blessing that exists outside of liturgical context that doesn't follow the rules of liturgical blessings.
And this is the section where we start to depart from the historic view of the Catholic Church on this issue, where the document is saying this is an innovation.
Do you mind getting into some detail about that? I'm going to very quickly grab myself a cup of water. Do you mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So yeah, give the audience some detail about that.
Yeah. So the historic view of the Catholic Church has been to promote marriage between a man and a woman, and to be against any recognition of same-sex relationships. And this is something we see not just within the church's blessings, not just within the church's sacraments, but also within the advocacy for legal laws within the specific countries. For instance, Human Rights Campaign said that the Catholic Church spent nearly $2 million in 2012 towards unsuccessful campaigns against gay marriage in 4 states. It was the second largest donor, representing a significant share of the contributions used to fund anti-gay marriage campaigns. The Archbishop of San Francisco campaigned in favor of California's Proposition 8, which would recognize heterosexual marriage as the only valid marriage in California. He donated himself. He raised $1.5 million towards that campaign. And he also called for a U.S. constitutional amendment. Bishops in all different countries across the world, from Ireland to Italy to Croatia, Slovenia, Poland, have been the strongest political advocates against the push for recognizing and legitimizing homosexual marriage, homosexual unions, civil unions. And this is all changing with this document.
All right. So we'll continue. One must not reduce the meaning of blessings to this alone, for it would lead us to expect the same moral conditions for a simple blessing that are called for in the reception of the sacraments. Such a risk requires that we broaden this perspective further. All right, so again, this is must, requires. This is not optional. Indeed, there is for the Roman Catholic, for us, it's irrelevant. Indeed, there is the danger that a pastoral gesture that is so beloved and widespread will be subjected to too many moral prerequisites, which under the claim of control could overshadow the unconditional power of God's love, that forms the basis for the gesture of blessing. All right. So essentially,
any Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you could.
Any Roman Catholic bishop who opposes this document and says, no, we're not doing this, this is what he's doing. He is falling under the danger of using too many moral prerequisites that overshadow the unconditional power of God's love. And as we see in the next sentence, Pope Francis urged us not to lose pastoral charity, which should permeate all our decisions and attitudes, and avoid being judges who only deny and reject. So any Catholic against this is being a judge who's only denying, rejecting, and that's something the Pope is urging us not to do.
And we see also I would say, to sum up the 12th paragraph, the obligation that a blessing to be only for a moral positive is too reductionist. I mean, they're saying right there, you can't have too many moral prerequisites. And so this is something that's greatly at odds with how the Orthodox understand blessings. Now, precisely in this regard, Pope Francis urges us not to lose pastoral charity, which should permeate all our decisions and attitudes, avoid being judges, deny, reject, and exclude. Let us then respond to the Holy Father's proposal by developing a broader understanding of blessings. Now, they do this within the context of quoting scriptures that show blessings that are not like there, because scriptures sometimes don't tell you what exactly is going on, just these general blessings. So I'll just pick up from here. Moses and Aaron blessed the community. The heads of the households blessed their children at weddings, before embarking on a journey and in the imminence of death. These blessings accordingly appear to be a superabundant and unconditional gift, i.e., the scriptures bless everything without regard to the morals of who received the blessing. All right? So that is the argument that's being made here, right? They're making general blessings with no regard to who's receiving the blessing, and so that means we could do this. But I want people to note that the scriptures don't bless immoral institutions or activities, such as opening a meth lab, but not blessing the smoking of meth, right? This is something that you don't see. Like, you don't see, oh, well, Jacob blessed Pharaoh, but it wasn't like the Pharaoh was persecuting the Jewish people or something. This is something where they've just made the assumption these are blessings given with no strings attached, but that no strings attached part's not in the scripture. All right. And I think anyone normal would see that the scriptures do have some regard to morals to what's blessed, because we don't have an example of something being immoral blessed. I think that would be the clearer teaching of the scriptures. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
All right. So we'll continue. Oh, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As we get down into the blessings, I think that'll be more clear for your audience, Craig. But this is specifically a blessing of a homosexual couple. It's not a blessing of a homosexual who comes and says, I want a blessing to improve my life. It's blessing the couple. So what are you blessing? The document says we're not blessing the union, we're blessing the couple. But isn't that being a little lawyerly? I think the couple will see it as a blessing of the couple, and I think the wording of the blessing is a blessing of the couple. So I think that'll be more clear as we get further into this.
We're blessing the meth lab, but not the operation of the meth lab.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is. And just say this with a straight face. Do you accept this? And if you accept this, all I can tell you is you're pretty much a cult member, because you're not using your brain anymore. Clearly something like that can't be blessed. Now, anyway, to continue. In his mystery of love, through Christ, God communicates to his church the power to bless. Granted by God to human beings and bestowed by them on their neighbors, the blessing is transformed into inclusion, solidarity, and peacemaking. It is a positive message of comfort, care, and encouragement, right? Like, so the blessings aren't, they can be for bad people because it encourages them. The blessing expresses God's merciful embrace in the church's motherhood, which invites the faithful to have the same feelings as God towards their brothers and sisters. All right, so blessings serve the role of encouraging people no matter where they be. Difference between blessing someone to leave sin versus blessing someone to remain in the circumstance that lead to it doesn't seem to be something that is made here. Because I just want to be clear. People in the Orthodox Church, people among the Protestant schismatics, non-believers, there are all sorts of evil people everywhere. So I'm not going to point my finger at this one class of sinful people within the Roman Catholic Church as they're somehow exceptional. I hate to break it to you, audience, but you're a broken toy made in a factory that only makes broken toys. All right? That is the human condition. And so the fact that any of us are blessed by God, because when we're blessed by a priest, they are just giving to us what is from God, right? The fact that God blesses any of us is an act of grace. We're undeserving it because of our sin. So what we're not saying is somehow the homosexual, the person in a regular relationship, as this document talks about, is somehow exceptional in their wickedness that they can't receive a blessing. That is absolutely not our point, or none of us could be blessed because we're all sinful. All right. Our point is that the blessing does have it is attached to necessarily the intent behind what is supposed to be being blessed. So if you bless someone, oh, they're going on their way and the priest blesses them. Well, it's have a safe trip, not drive to the meth lab or do something evil, right? That is not what's being blessed here. And so the intent behind the blessing is important. Does that mean in real world situations, there's going to be an exhaustive analysis behind everything? No, especially for mundane things. But for very important things like buying a house, a job, writing a book, the plethora of things, should I get married? The things that a priest will bless, the really important things, they're going to examine this stuff, right? Like a priest might not bless you to be married if all the time you're confessing, I'll just make up something, that you struggle with some sort of sexual thoughts that are wrong, they're for the same sex, and then you're only getting married so you can look normal. He might not bless you because you're going to be ruining your wife's life. Or if it's a woman, your husband's life, right? So the intent behind something is important. You can't detach those things. But this document doesn't teach that, which is really the core issue here. It's like, no, a blessing just could encourage people. And so you really don't have to look and scrutinize any of that other stuff. And that's just ridiculous. It's just wrong. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Mark.
Yeah, it's encourage people on what? What are we encouraging here?
With the 800-pound gorilla in the room is we know what's being encouraged is sexual morality.
Yeah, and I think it also is asking the Catholic priest or bishop performing these blessings to turn a blind eye to what the couple coming for the blessing believes by that blessing. The couple in that's coming for that blessing, they want some affirmation for their status as a couple, but and a lot of lay people are not going to look at this document and fully understand all of the nuances that are said here. They're just coming because they want affirmation, they want encouragement, and they want to be accepted in that relationship. And the Catholic priest or bishop is not supposed to look at their intent, just give that blessing, and then this is how he can logically legitimize ignoring what he's doing.
Don't think, like the quote happy, it's Billy Madison, don't think, just hand it over. That's what he said when they hurt the company. He's like, don't think about it, just bless them. You must. It's required. That's the words in this document. So one who asks for a blessing shows himself to be in need of God's saving presence in his life, and one who asks for a blessing from the church recognizes the latter as a sacrament of the salvation that God offers, which is interesting that we're saying non-liturgical and in the sacrament, it's a sacramental but not a sacrament, but it might be the English translation, so I'm not going to.
So note, this is the pastoral understanding, the theological understanding that the pastor, the priest, the bishop is supposed to have, that all the responsibility is on that couple to understand this. That couple's not going to understand all the theological nuances. So this is a removal of responsibility from the priest.
That's a good point. And if I could complain about ourselves, it's sort of like the idea where I'll say the elephant in the room. Greek churches, the OCA, not universally, but a lot of them, and I'd say almost all of them, at least in New York, is you walk into the door, you're getting communed. They don't ask who your bishop is or anything, most of them. OCA is better with that, actually, than the Greeks. Looks like my camera turned off. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. So hopefully my camera comes back. I'm going to try to bring it back to life. And if it doesn't, I don't know, you can at least hear my voice. It's not like my face is that important. But that being said, is Right? The idea behind communing everyone, but not asking who their bishop is confessing is just kind of, well, I trust that maybe they confessed, they went to vigil somewhere else last night and they confessed there, or or something like that. And we all know putting the onus on someone, and now you have my other backup camera, so sorry, people. Putting the onus on someone to on the individual when you never communicate, no, this is what expected of you, is not appropriate. And I've heard in churches they say communion's for those who have properly prepared themselves and been to recent confession. Well, what's that even mean? Recent as in within the year? What is preparation? How much fasting? Should I have read the prayers? So, right, people, the without a leader, the people perish, as one of the Proverbs says. And so we have this problem within certain parts of Orthodoxy as well, where there's just no discernment of these things. And what this leads to is everyone communes. Now, let me apply this to the Roman Catholic Church, because, of course, the Roman Catholic priest never, ever discerns these things, and everyone communes in the Roman Catholic Church. How would this be any different for these blessings, right? Because these people, unless they're told very specifically otherwise, are just going to show up. And that's what happens in every single church that does something like this.
I think a difference here is the intention. It's that complex relationship between the intention of the priest has to be good and the intention of the people has to be good. And if the intention of the priest is good, but the people have some sins that they're not confessing that are mortal sins, they can go and they can still get communion. But that responsibility falls on them.
Absolutely.
And here, I would argue a lot of the homosexuals coming for these blessings, their intention is going to be good. They want to grow closer to God in some way. They don't understand that the church is not approving of them. It seems like they are approving of their relationship. But the intention of the Pope here is to put the priests in a position where they can't have good intentions, and they can't have the idea that we're only going to bless something that's going to further these people towards the right path.
All right, so we'll continue. To seek a blessing in the church is to acknowledge that the life of the church springs from the move of God's mercy and helps us to move forward, to live better, and to respond to the Lord's will. So the act of seeking a blessing helps repentance, right? So I could see like, well, we want to help people within these situations do better, right? So I think it's one thing if the individual within the relationship comes like, Father, do you bless me to leave this relationship? And you go, absolutely, I do. Right? So we're not going to take that away from anyone, right? We want that for ourselves, for all sorts of things we need to be blessed with so we could live better, God honoring lives. But that is not a catch-all that helps them, I think, in this situation. So to continue, in order to help us understand the value of a more pastoral approach to blessings, again, always be wary of people that cloak evil by calling it pastoral, right? Because what sounds good isn't what's always pastoral. Sometimes what's pastoral is what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Pope Francis urges us to contemplate with an attitude of faith and fatherly mercy the fact that when one asks for a blessing, one is expressing a petition for God's assistance, a plea to live better, and a confidence in a Father who can help us live better. Right? Better how? It's a good question, especially if we're considering what is being blessed. This request should, now it doesn't say must, in every way be valued, accompanied, received with gratitude. People who come spontaneously to ask for a blessing now by this request, their sincere openness to transcendence, the confidence of their hearts that they do not trust in their own strength alone, they are needed for God, and the desire to break out of the narrow confines of this world and close in its limitation. So it's sort of like saying, because they're asking for it, we're going to presume they want to, in some vague way, come closer to God, and we don't need to differentiate anything more than that. We don't need to discern anything more than that. It's almost like when the Boy Scouts would kick you out if you didn't believe in God, and they would even go, all right, it doesn't have to be a Christian God. Do you just believe in some transcendent higher power, right? I had a friend that was an Eagle Scout, that was an atheist, and he said, well, I don't believe in God. And they said, well, will you accept the transcendent higher power in some vague way? And he said, no. Like, well, then you can't be an Eagle Scout. That's what it used to be. But right, like you're saying that's a very far cry from I want to be a faithful Catholic. I want to be a faithful Christian. That's really not what's being demanded here. And so this openness to change for the better, but no, not specifically change in the specific way that's scandalous here, meaning not change the orientation of the relationship, right? So we see it's this vague thing. I'm open to being more godly, but it's not specific enough where that means openness to actually repenting of this relationship. That is not what's being blessed here.
And these brackets are yours, Craig.
Yes, just so people are aware. IE in brackets is my own. It's my interpretation. All right, so thank you all. You just wanted to clarify. All right, we will continue. From the point of view of pastoral care, blessings should be evaluated as acts of devotion that are external to the celebration of the Holy Eucharist and the other sacraments. Let's say this is exclusive. I'd say, of course, that's its intent. Indeed, the language, rhythm, course, and theological emphasis of popular piety differ from those of the corresponding liturgical action. For this reason, pious practices must conserve their proper style, simplicity, and language, and attempts to impose forms of liturgical celebration on them are always to be avoided. I would just add again, when are they to be always avoided? Because these are the sort of things lawyers can insert in there. I'm very well aware the intent is always means all the time, no matter what. But it doesn't need to be interpreted that way. That's not how it's worded. So we got some of your highlights here, Mark. So I presume we will take our time with this. The church here, the Roman Catholic Church, moreover, must shy away from resting its pastoral praxis on the fixed nature of certain doctrinal or disciplinary schemes, especially when they lead to a narcissistic and authoritarian elitism, whereby instead of evangelizing, one analyzes and classifies others, and instead of opening the door to grace, one exhausts his or her energies in inspecting and verifying, right? Meaning, like I said before, not discerning the nature of the blessing. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Mark.
So this is interesting here, that doctrine cannot be fixed. It can't be stationary, it can't be stable, it can't be the same. The doctrine has to develop. So even this doctrine that the church is teaching right now is not necessarily the doctrine of tomorrow. It's definitely not the doctrine of yesterday. In November, bishops and priests were not allowed to bless these couples. Today they are. Going into 2024, they are. And many in the following this movement on both sides say this is just a step in a progression that the church continues to change. And it's important here that the church is specifically teaching as doctrine, not to have stable doctrine or fixed doctrine. That is the doctrine here. What do you think of that, Craig?
To be perfectly honest, I just think the intent behind this is clearly just to start normalizing, regularizing gay marriage. And there's even certain ways where they could start redefining the sacraments where they could go that way, which is why I've made special note of always and must and these different exclusive sort of terms, because I think this is all supposed to be a slippery slope. That's why it's penned this way. That's my opinion. So to continue, thus, when people ask for a blessing, an exhaustive moral analysis should not be placed as a precondition for conferring it. For those seeking a blessing, should not be required to have prior moral perfection. All right. And so, like I said, there's a positive command not to scrutinize the people asking for a blessing. While this properly leaves the door open to not bless if someone communicates something immoral, right? So it does sound like, someone could interpret this, be like, I want my, immoral coupling to be blessed and I want to do bad things with it. The priest could say no. But they can't require them to really, break that down. Like, well, if I bless this, is this because you guys are going to become like monastics, but still talk to each other on the phone and you'd be separate? I mean, where are we going with this? It sounds like the document's
interesting how it says this properly, and this is the paragraph above, this properly leaves the door open for I lost my place here. But it leaves the door open for the priest to say the couple relationship is immoral, so I'm not going to bless it. But it also leaves the door open for him to say, I'm not going to look at that because the rest of this document said I'm supposed to shy away from certain doctrinal schemes, not have authoritarian elitism, not be spend all my energy on judging. So it's leaving a lot of doors open. It's trying to give something to everybody where everybody can find their little place in this, and vastly different practices can be held.
Alrighty, so we continue in this perspective. The Holy Father's respuestas aid in expanding the congregation of the doctrine of the faith's 2021 pronouncement from a pastoral point of view. For the respuestas, invite discernment concerning the possibility of forms of blessing requested by one or more persons that do not convey an erroneous conception of marriage, i.e., they don't demand a redefinition of the traditional stance communicated in this document, which does uphold the traditional definition of marriage. And in situations that are morally unacceptable from an objective point of view. All right. And so I think this is a flat out admission. We're blessing the meth lab, but not the explicit smoking of meth. All right. We'll continue. Account for the fact that pastoral charity requires us not to treat simply as sinners those whose guilt or responsibility may be attenuated by various factors affecting subjective imputability. You want to add to that, Mark?
I think you did a good job.
All right, we'll continue. In the catechesis cited at the beginning of this declaration, Pope Francis proposed a description of this kind of blessing that is offered to all without requiring anything. It is worth reading these words with an open heart, for they help us to grasp the pastoral meaning of blessings without preconditions. I'm not going to read everything, but they're telling you very flat out, there's no preconditions for these blessings. There are several occasions when people spontaneously ask for a blessing. Again, spontaneous, because the idea is people get a blessing and here's an example, you walk past a priest on the street and you put your hands out and then he blesses you and you kiss his hand, right? That's a spontaneous blessing. Now, would the priest know that if you were wearing a shirt that flat out says, kill the unborn in the womb or something? He probably wouldn't, right? But so the issue is spontaneous does not justify these unions or these couples, because the fact it's a couple already tells you what you need to know, like that T-shirt, right? And so I think that's something that, is, again, 800-pound gorilla in the room that's ignored by the legalese of this document.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, there are several occasions as people have spontaneously asked for a blessing, whether on pilgrimages, at shrines, or even on the street when they meet a priest. And so, for example, when a homosexual couple asks for a blessing, or a Mexican drug cartel for their meth lab, we don't ask what they intend to do with it, right? That's the idea here. And so, I won't get more into my note because I kind of already went into that. So, by way of example, we can refer to the Book of Blessings, which provides several rites for blessing people, including the elderly, the sick, participants in catechetical prayer meetings, pilgrims, those embarking on a journey, volunteer groups and associations, and more. Such blessings are meant for everyone. No one is to be excluded from them. Again, no one's going to exclude an individual homosexual walking past a priest and getting a spontaneous blessing. The issue is the couple, because of what the intent behind blessing a couple is. You're blessing their togetherness, and that is actually precisely the issue here. No one can be prevented, according to this document, from this act of giving thanks, and each person, even if he or she lives in situations that are not ordered to the Creator's plan, by the way, none of our situations perfectly are, possesses positive elements for which we can praise the Lord. So, for example, that meth lab might make the cartel money so they could get more cross tattoos and renovate the town's cathedral or something, I suppose. So we could bless that meth lab. It's pretty nuts. We'll continue. From the perspective of the ascending dimension, when one becomes aware of the Lord's gifts and his unconditional love, even in sinful situations, particularly when a prayer finds a hearing, the believer's heart lifts its praise to God and blesses him. No one is precluded from this type of blessing. Everyone, individually together with others, can lift their praise and gratitude to God. All right? And so I just think, again, what we see here is they're conflating that, yes, someone, a sinner, which is what we all are, could give thanks to God. They could seek to improve. They could seek to draw closer. And that means that you could somehow bless their situation, which I think is that's what's being missed here. Is yes, individuals could receive blessings. Individuals can receive blessings and do something wrong. And I would say individuals in a context that's wrong don't receive blessings unless it's somehow communicated precisely what that context is and what the correct intent behind it is. That is the real obvious thing that ought to be said here, which is not. The popular understanding of blessings, however, also values the importance of descending blessings. While it's not appropriate for a diocese, a bishop's conference, or any other ecclesial structure to constantly and officially establish procedures or rituals for all kinds of matters, pastoral prudence and wisdom, avoiding all serious forms of scandal, confusion among the faithful, may suggest, it doesn't appear they can demand, at least not explicitly, that the ordained minister join in the prayer of those persons who, although in a union that cannot be compared in any way to a marriage, desire to entrust themselves to the Lord and his mercy, to invoke his help, and to be guided to a greater understanding of his plan of love and of truth. Mark, what's going on here?
This ends a very lengthy section justifying what they're about to do. Section 31 is actually saying what this blessing is, and all the justifications, taking all sides on every issue, contradicting themselves, is about to become crystallized in this next paragraph.
All right. So, and we can see they walk in there not seeking to leave the union whatsoever. It's pretty much they could see good things within that union. Now, blessing of couples in irregular situations and of couples of the same sex. Now, people, put your big boy, pants on. We got to talk about the sex because, that exists in the adult world. So let's be mature. Within the horizon outlined here appears a possibility of blessings for couples in irregular situations. This document does not define irregular situations. So what does that mean? Multiple spouses, concubines, children, right? Pederasty, animals, who knows? It just says irregular situations. So any of those things theoretically could be blessed. And for couples the same sex. I just don't know why they need to call everything irregular.
So, Craig,
yes.
To take the other side on this, could irregular situations be like a person between jobs or someone who's in school and working at the same time? Or are we specifically looking at sexual relationships that are irregular?
Well, clearly the intent of this document is to talk about that and about sexual couplings. Now, yeah, I'd say as the papal lawyer, we can make irregular anything. Regular situation could be you thought you bought honey nut Cheerios and it's the regular stuff, and you put those Cheerios in your mouth and weren't sugar. You got surprised. That's I suppose is a regular situation.
So if this is irregular sexual relations, how irregular is too much to not be irregular anymore?
It doesn't say.
Is there any limit? Is there any outside limit on how irregular that sexual relationship would be?
There's logically no limit. I mean, sadly, it could get to the point where I don't want to get to that, but I mean, people that want to marry their sex dolls or something nuts like that, anything, sky's the limit. Until that limit is actually communicated, which this document does not communicate.
Is there any age limit here?
Now, no, there's not. And I would want to add this. For couples of the same sex, they can't have three because couple means two. But it says irregular situation and for couples of the same sex. So because of the word and, does that allow multiple same-sex couplings?
Well,
right.
It's interesting you bring that up because polygamy was discussed in the document that led into this document. That question was raised on several occasions. It does say couples several times here. So I think at this step on the ladder, we're looking at couples, but I think all sides look at this as a step, not a final position. I think this document also looks at this step because it urges us not to have a fixed nature on our doctrine. So this is doctrine here, but it's not the final doctrine. It's just the stepping stone towards other doctrines.
And again, it's I would say again, the intent is they're talking about two normal people trying to do the right thing, supposedly, right? That is, I think, the intent behind this document. But again, people will twist these things because they will not, because the postmodernism and relativism intellectually in society, intent is not used to really determine the meaning of anything that's written. And I mean, let's be honest, though, it happened in the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court in Colorado. So this is something that is to ignore that this is part of the zeitgeist is to your detriment. So anyway, we'll continue. The form of which should not be fixed ritually by ecclesial authorities to avoid producing confusion with the blessing proper to the sacrament of marriage. So it cannot look identical to marriage. But it's interesting that it's like we can't fix either, the Roman Catholics, precisely how these blessings are to look, apparently. It says several times that they cannot be fixed.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways that this can be done.
So
this is explicit, though, if you look a little further, that you can't have anything that looks like a marriage, whether garments or rings,
clothes, yeah,
or words from, I think it says words from the ceremony.
You can't say it can't be man and man, stuff like that.
But at the same time as this document is more concerned about the outward manifestations than the inward state of the heart of the people that are approaching. The people who are approaching are asking for affirmation, and all that this cares about is what they're wearing.
There you go. It's at least someone cares about what someone else is wearing, right? So, yeah. So we will continue. They cannot look like that. A blessing may be part of that not only as ascending value, but also involves the invocation of a blessing that descends from God upon those who recognize themselves to be destined to God's help, do not claim legitimization or legitimation of their own status. So this is interesting. If you walk in and say, we're a homosexual couple, we look that you legitimize homosexuality, they can deny the blessing, according to this document, right? So like if there is a transparent attempt to communicate something that contradicts the traditional teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, they can say no. That is
clearly these couples are coming for legitimation of their status.
They just can't communicate.
This is such a big step, and that's why
But they can't communicate it though.
Right.
Right. And the priest can't ask. By the way.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street. No one can communicate it. Don't ask. Just hand it over. But who beg that all that is true, good, and humanly valid in their lives and their relationships, or meth lab, be enriched, healed, and elevated. I mean, I guess a more profitable, more fulfilling meth lab, or homosexual union. You tell me. By the presence of the Holy Spirit. Now, the blessing is not specifically for only morally positive things, as we can see. These forms of blessing express a supplication that God may grant those aids that come from the impulses of His Spirit, what classic theology calls actual grace, so that the human relationships may mature and grow in fidelity to the gospel, that they may be freed from the imperfections and frailties, and that they may express themselves in the ever-increasing dimension of divine love. And so I'm going to give you a second, in a second, give you some time, Mark, but I just want to say, that's why I keep talking about the meth lab, because how do you make a meth lab mature and grow in fidelity to the gospel? You can't, right? How do you make a homosexual union, or right? It's the couple that is blessed, but not the union. I forget. It's getting confusing. I can make a same-sex couple blessed, but to grow, mature, and fidelity to the gospel, you can't. The coupling is not blessable in that sense. You could bless the individual to leave it, right? That's doable, but you can't bless the couple. And so it seems to me a categorization that doesn't have any real-world application. This is calling evil good. That's just what's going on here. Mark.
Yeah, I think it's really significant how this this supplication would be made, because this is the written form of it as it stands, that we want this to mature and grow. We want it to increase in love. This relationship that is opposed to the gospel, that's a mortal sin according to the Catholic Church. This is the beginning of the overturning of a doctrine that they've held for 2,000 years.
Well, it's not a big deal, right?
Well,
Right?
I would at least say that it's mysterious and unpredictable.
All right. And so I'm just going to read something now because we got something here called the on the participation of the faithful in the Eucharist. It's from the Moscow Patriarchate Synod in 2015. And I'm going to read this because I want people to be aware. The Orthodox are not as prudish as you would imagine on these issues, but I want you to see the difference in how they apply, let's say, in a regular situation, and communing and people in regular situations. All right, so we're going to start reading. In contrast with adulterous cohabitation, which is a canonical impediment for communion, right? So if you're committing adultery, you cannot commune, according to the Moscow Patriarchate. The former union constitutes, that's marriage, a legal marriage in the eyes of the church, except the cases when legally permissible marriages between close relatives, same-sex cohabitations, recognized in a number of countries, are, from the church's point of view, unacceptable in principle, right? So they just flat out say no. The duty of pastors, however, is to remind the faithful of the necessity not only to contract a legally valid marriage, but also to sanctify such marriage to the liturgical rite of the church. Special attention is given to cases when persons have lived together for a long time, often having children together, but are not united either through ecclesiastical or a state-recognized marriage, meaning baby mama, baby papa living together, but they're not married. Moreover, one of the persons in this cohabitation does not desire either to register the relationship or marry the church, meaning the other person does. Such cohabitations are sinful, and their wide dissemination in the world demonstrates the rebellion against the divine purpose concerning man, endangers the institution of marriage, and cannot receive any recognition from the church. At the same time, the spiritual father who knows the life situation of a specific person and condescends to human weakness may, in exceptional cases, admit, so right now, this shouldn't be normal. In exceptional cases, admit to communion the person in this relationship who is aware of the sinfulness of such cohabitation and seeks to enter a lawful marriage. All right? Seeks to enter a lawful marriage. Why is this relevant? Because it shows you here's a regular situation, and they give a very specific context in which this person could commune. That, let's say it's a mother, the father doesn't want to get married, she has 4 kids with the guy. She doesn't want to break up that family. Those children have a father. They otherwise have a stable household, and she wants, with all her being, to be married. They permit that woman to commune if the spiritual father discerns that she has all the correct intent and everything. Now, this might blow some people's minds, but again, this is spelled out here in this 2015 document from the Moscow Patriarchy. Now, we have similar things like this in church history. The Council of Toledo in the year 400, in one of its canons, allows people with concubines to commune because they couldn't legally get married under Roman law if they were in different social classes. So there'd be people with children, like Augustine, before he repented. He had a concubine. He had a child with that concubine. He wasn't with many different women until after he left that concubine, by the way. He was, from all intents and purposes, faithful to that concubine. The Council of Toledo would have allowed him to commune if he was a Christian, not to be a priest or anything like that. But that's just something people be aware of. Now, you can say, well, that's too liberal. St. Hippolytus would agree with you. In apostolic tradition, it does not allow concubines to commune. It just allows them to pray with everyone else in church. So they have
Craig, just to make it clear to the audience, would a concubine in that sense, in that culture, be for us a civil marriage without a church marriage? Is that kind of the same idea?
It would be a common law marriage, is what we call it. Right? It's, you never showed up to the courthouse and got a marriage. You never showed up at the church house and got a marriage. But you're with that person and have kids with that person. And
okay, so it's 2 people that didn't get married, man and a woman. They've got a family, but they never got the marriage. That's a concubine.
Never got the marriage. That's right. And so essentially what we see the Moscow Patriarch doing in 2015 is updating that Council of Toledo and applying it to, like, we don't have concubines anymore. Or at least these common law wives don't call themselves concubines, you know, even that's essentially really what it is. They're updating that old teaching to that situation. So being that Toledo's in the West, this shows you this is something that just didn't exclusively exist in the East. This was part of the West of morality. Just like there was divorce in the West, by the way, ecclesial divorce as well, among the Franks and things like that. This is something that existed. But I point this out because it gives the positive teaching that this person can only commune because they have the intent to get married. And it would actually be a greater evil to break apart the family at this juncture. That they're not held accountable for, they're held accountable for their past sin, but not in the present. They've repented of that. Now only the spouse or the husband, not the husband, the common law husband, I guess, you know, the boy toy is held accountable because he won't marry her, or vice versa. That person's not allowed to commune. This document spells out. The person whose cohabitation is guilty of preventing this marriage from taking place cannot be admitted to communion. If, however, at least one of the cohabitating persons is married to another person, both sides cannot be admitted to communion without canonical rectification of their condition and offering appropriate penance. Right? So meaning this is not open to the woman keeping her family together, but she's still essentially the concubine to a man with another wife. She is not allowed to commune in that situation, which is, I think, by the way, what St. Hippolytus was speaking of more specifically. And so this document is actually consistent both with Hippolytus and the Council of Toledo. And by the way, both people writing from the West, which is interesting. So there you go. The Orthodox are not so prudish that we will not encounter these situations and try to deal with them pastorally, right? That word pastoral. But that is how you actually deal with it pastorally, not how the Pope recently did by accepting this document. So I'm going to share a screen again. We're going to continue reading, and then we will get into that. Do you have any more comments on this, Mark?
No, I think you did it well.
All right, so I just got to share a screen, and here we go. Indeed, the grace of God works in the lives of those who do not claim to be righteous, but who acknowledge themselves humbly as sinners like everyone else. This grace can orient everything. I guess this includes the meth lab, the man and a horse, etc., according to the mysterious and unpredictable designs of God. Therefore, with its untiring wisdom and motherly care, the Church welcomes all who approach God with humble hearts, accompanying them with those spiritual aids that enable everyone to understand and realize God's will fully in their existence. So do you have any comments on that, Mark?
I would argue that the Pope is mysterious and unpredictable. I would argue this document is mysterious and unpredictable. And this is, again, where you have to look not just at the concrete of what they're saying, which contradicts throughout, but also at what's between the lines. They're asking the Catholic faithful to accept something that's mysterious, that's unpredictable, that they don't understand. Why are you blessing what we've worked so hard for these last 20 years in the US and other countries to lobby against, that we've donated towards? That the Catholic Church has come out with statements saying that we can't have legislation recognize civil unions between same-sex couples because that would go against God's teaching. And now we are blessing the same thing that a few years ago we were campaigning against the state doing.
So, like, people,
I think the only thing you can do as a faithful Catholic is say, I don't understand. And this is where it's condescending to their frustration with the doctrine of the Church not being fixed in nature.
Yeah, that apostolic deposit of faith with the doctrinal development added in is not so dependable or discernible anymore now, is it? So that being said, this grace can orient everything. Now, this meme, I think, really captures it really well. We see the Pope here blessing Herod and Herodias, saying, I bless the couple, but not the union, right? And so I just want to drive home everything. This could be blessed according to this document, right?
So
this could be blessed.
Make it really clear, Craig, for the audience. Who's Herod and Herodias? What was wrong with that?
Who would
relationship.
go an hour and a half into this and not know about that? How about you? But yeah, no, I will do that. Right? Herodias, Herodias, and if I remember right, wasn't Herodias Herodias had a daughter, or is
That's
Herodias
correct.
the daughter? Right? So Herodias had a daughter.
Herod's brother married Herodias,
Yeah.
and the brother and Herodias had a daughter, and then Herod married Herodias. So he's marrying his brother's wife.
All right. And there's the kind of creepy things to the daughter. And St. John the Baptist spoke out against Herod marrying his brother's wife. He was imprisoned. And then because Herodias' daughter, pretty much at the behest of her mother, did a little dance and secured a pledge to do whatever she asked for, she asked for the execution of St. John the Baptist. Now, that being said, we see the Pope here blessing this union where he married his brother's wife, and something the scripture clearly condemns, right? The whole episode is condemned. It's wrong. It's evil. And now we have taken, using the Pope splaining, we've turned what is evil into something good. You cannot discern these things. And that's why I just think this meme makes it very clear. This just shows you can say, it doesn't invalidate papal infallibility on a technical basis. I just would say your whole technical basis, your whole epistemology for believing in papal infallibility is bogus. It's in complete contradiction to the scriptures and basic common sense. No one's brains operate this way and would take this seriously. Do you have any comments on the meme?
So this would be an irregular situation, right?
I would say so, because Leviticus doesn't allow you to marry your brother's wife.
So Saint John, the greatest prophet, the last prophet before Christ, he said a lot of good things, but he specifically lost his life for saying this is not okay. If he was under the Pope as a priest or bishop, he would be asked to not have an exhaustive moral list and to give
required. The word is
required,
required.
thank you, and to give a pastoral blessing to this relationship.
Oh, I guess Jesus was a worse pope than Pope Francis is. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, Lord have mercy. Oh my gosh, how are we even having this conversation? How are even people? I want to say this. I think for normal Roman Catholics that aren't papal apologists, they're like Protestants. They're in a church. They accept their church has error, but they're Italian, they're Spanish, they're Portuguese, they're Brazilian. They're like, hey, this is my family's church. We've always been this, right or wrong. I'm Roman Catholic. I don't think anyone has it fully right. I can respect that. I mean, I don't agree with them, but I can respect that. That's a cogent worldview. What I don't respect is the Pope explaining to try to make evil good, because it's evil, and we should be able to say, yes, this is wrong, and it can never be right.
Craig, right, you take it from here for a couple minutes. I've got to switch devices. I'm running low on battery.
All right, not a problem. So we're going to take over from Mark here. And it says, this is a blessing that must be nurtured, not hindered. So not me saying must, not me saying required. That's what's in this document. It continues, the church's liturgy itself invites us to adopt this trusting attitude, even in the midst of our sins, lacks of merits, weaknesses, and confusions, which this ironically doesn't really address confusions. How often, through a pastor's simple blessing, which does not claim to sanction or legitimize anything, can people experience the nearness of the Father beyond all merits and desires? Now, I would actually take issue with this. A pastor's simple blessing is like when you're a spontaneous one where you're walking in the street, but it is legitimizing something. It's you seeking to be closer to God, to be close to the priest. You're not acting as a couple. Mark, is that you with battery back?
Yes, that's me.
All right, so you're back. And so we'll continue. Can experience the nearness of the Father beyond all merits and desires. And so again, it's this positive teaching that intent is not discerned when giving a blessing, and that's just totally wrong. That is not orthopraxy. There's no orthopraxy. That's heteropraxy. Therefore, The pastoral sensibility of ordained ministers should also be formed to perform blessings spontaneously that are not found in the book of blessings, i.e., for anyone without regard to intent. That's the whole key of this document, but contrary to ethos Christianity. In this sense, it is essential to grasp the Holy Father's concern that these non-ritualized blessings never cease being simple gestures that provide an effective means of increasing trust in God on the part of the blessing of the people who ask for them, careful that they should not become liturgical or semi-liturgical acts similar to a sacrament. All right, so I really think the intent of this document is they cannot explicitly turn this into a sacramental marriage, which remains a traditional teaching. Indeed, such a ritualization, but not a different ritualization, so it still leaves it open to some sort of ritualization, would constitute a serious impoverishment because it would subject a gesture of great value in popular piety to excessive control, depriving ministers of freedom and spontaneity in the pastoral accompaniment of people's lives. Do you have something to add, Mark?
No, that's I agree.
All right, so we'll keep going. In this regard, there come to mind the following words the Holy Father already quoted in part. Decisions that may be part of pastoral prudence in certain circumstances should not necessarily become a norm. I mean, they can, but they should not necessarily. That is to say, it is not necessarily appropriate for a diocese, a bishop's conference, or any other ecclesial structure to constantly officially establish procedures or rituals for all kinds of matters. So again, I do think the intent of the document is they don't want a specific ritual attached to the blessing of the same-sex couple. For this reason, one should, we notice not the word must, should, even though must is used elsewhere, neither provide for nor promote a ritual for the blessings of couples in a regular situation, right? So my inference that it leaves the door open is, I think, very clearly here, because it has must in different situations, but should here. At the same time, one should not prevent or prohibit the church's closeness to people in every situation in which they might seek God's help through a simple blessing. So I see the door is open not to apply this infallible teaching of faith and morals, but, is it ex cathedra, is it correct intent or whatever? I find that pretty interesting. I think that leaves the door open pretty wide. I don't know what you think, Mark.
So let's look at ex cathedra statements. Ex cathedra is the document in Vatican I which says, "We teach and define as divinely revealed dogma that when the Roman pontiff, that's the Pope, speaks ex cathedra, that is when in the exercise of his office as shepherd and teacher of all Christians in virtue of his supreme apostolic authority, he defines a doctrine concerning faith or morals to be held by the whole church. He possesses by divine assistance promised to him in Blessed Peter the infallibility which the divine Redeemer has given to St. Peter." So in order for a statement to be ex cathedra, it must be done from his office as Pope, which this is, and it must be a doctrine, which this defines it as doctrine, on faith or morals, which this is, as it's defined multiple times throughout. We're looking at faith and morals. So the teaching of this doctrine is infallible because it does meet those requirements set by Vatican I. And those that go against this document, such as saying this is wrong, the Pope is against the Bible, the Pope is opposed to the millennial teaching of the Church, that would make that person anathema because they're denying the infallibility of the Church as well as the teaching of the Pope.
See, if I were to Pope explain it, I'd say the infallible part is that you can ask for these preconditions and whatnot. But even then, you could say, well, that's a practice, whether or not you ask for these preconditions and whatnot for blessings. So I personally think this does not invalidate Pope's explanation infallibility. Again, no normal person would really even care about that. But that's why, I don't see this as some sort of victory against Roman Catholic apologists. It's just another cringe moment that lays bare the insanity of their epistemology, I think. So that being said, we'll continue. We see in a brief prayer preceding the spontaneous blessing, the ordained minister could ask the individuals of peace, health, the spirit of patience, dialogue, and mutual assistance That is kind of creepy again for the same-sex couple, mutual assistance. So they're saying you could actually bless them to prosper in this coupling, right? You're not dissuading them to leave it, but also God's life and strength to be able to fulfill his will completely. So the door is open really to pretty much endorse this without explicitly using the language of contradicting traditional marriage as defined by the Roman Catholic Church. In any case, precisely to avoid any form of confusion or scandal, when the prayer of blessing is requested by a couple in a regular situation, even though it is expressed outside the rites prescribed by the liturgical books, this blessing should, again, not must, never be imparted in concurrence with the ceremonies of the civil union. So that's a pretty big door left open, and not even in connection with them. So of course the intent is they don't want to approve of civil gay marriage. But again, it's that door is purposely left open. Nor can, again, that kind of optional language, it be performed with any clothing gestures or words that are proper to a wedding. And I think, again, they're trying to use this language that can be twisted to allow for these things. Clearly, the intent is against it. And I'm going to ask exact. Same applies when the blessing is requested by a same-sex couple. So, right, the same rules, I guess, probably apply to same-sex couples. Is it the same? Mostly, it just doesn't specify. And again, I think a lot of this is intentional. Do you have anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, I think this section highlights that they are concerned with the outward manifestations, what liturgical books are used, how the people dress, what they look like. They're not concerned with the position of their heart, what they're coming for, that this is an affirmation of their status as a couple in a romantic relationship.
Well, the scriptures say God is not like man that looks at outside appearances, but looks at the heart. So men look at outside appearances. No contradiction, right? So what has been said in this declaration regarding the blessing of same-sex couples is sufficient to guide the prudent and fatherly discernment of ordained ministers in this regard. Thus, beyond the guidance provided above, no further responses should, again, not must, be expected about possible ways to regulate details or practicalities regarding blessings of this type. So it sounds like they're not looking for clarifications on how these blessings should look. Would you agree that's what it's communicating?
They don't want to answer questions about this. They don't want to be pressed on it. The Pope did come out 3 days after this document was released and urged the Church again not to focus too much strictly on doctrine, basically because he's being called to the carpet by a lot of conservative bishops and priests saying, this contradicts our historic doctrine. He says, well, don't focus too much on that. That's the first response, but they're not necessarily going to respond to anything. They're going to respond to what they want to here.
All right, so I'm going to be opening up the audience questions now. We reached the end of the document. And Mark, if you don't mind, could you give us your overall analysis of what we just picked apart here?
My overall analysis is that the document is clear. This is an innovation. This is a development on doctrine. This is moving away from official historical documents and the position of the Church of Catholicism, how it's taught on this issue up till now, but is pointing out that doctrine can be developed. And I think that's the more important issue here for a lot of conservative Catholics, that it's going to bring about a realization that this can develop further. The bishop of the Belgian Catholic Church has come out and said, we recognize this is a very important step, and it's a step towards finally recognizing same-sex unions as finally giving them the sacrament of marriage, which will happen later. A lot of conservative bishops have also stood up against this and said, we're concerned about the progression here. So this is a stepping stone. This is a step on a ladder of doctrine that's going in a particular direction, and it's not going to end here.
Yeah, my overall comments are this is what you should expect from the epistemology that developed in the Roman Catholic Church after the schism.
Well, I'm interested in that, Craig. You wrote a book on this recently. What is your take on the first millennium Catholicism developing, the second millennium Catholicism developing? Is this the first time they've developed doctrine, or is this something that that started a lot earlier?
I mean, it's very basically, and again, I'll plug the book, The Rise and Fall of the Papacy, if you actually want to know what the papacy in the first millennium was, because it's not the Pope's explanations that you hear. They were just another Orthodox jurisdiction. And so the way the Roman Christians, those in the West, understood Christianity, the church canons, how to interpret the scriptures would have been fundamentally no different than how the Orthodox understand it today. And so this is something where this whole line of thinking would be very bizarre in the first millennium. To have the fact that even like anything would be parsed like this and written this way would be very bizarre in the first millennium. And I think someone who's read a lot of the early church documents and see how the early church operated would see that. Now, people don't like when I keep using the word epistemology. Let me use a simpler word for the simpletons out there, because they don't like the word epistemology. The way people thought about stuff was pretty basic. There was an apostolic deposit of faith given once and for all, as the Epistle of Jude says. All right? And what the church has always done was just preserved that same apostolic deposit of faith. They had no concept that it was developing or anything like that. They didn't talk about it in those terms. If you read the councils, they say, this is the teaching of the fathers. This is what we all believe. Meaning, this is what it always was, and this is what everyone everywhere thinks. That is what people thought, because they thought that's what the apostolic deposit was of Christians, is what was preserved and what everyone holds to, because if it's everywhere, you know it's not a regional aberration. Okay? And so Rome would have been no different in this peculiar view. And so that being the case, when did this change? It changed when the Roman Catholic Church started, I would say, creating the distinctives with papal ecclesiology that became what you see the Vatican I ecclesiology. That did start with Anastasius the Librarian. That did start with him trying to say, well, ecumenical councils are only authoritative as much as a pope says so, which you would never hear before that. Canons are authoritative only as much as a pope says so. You'd never hear that before that.
So make it really clear for the audience here, Craig. Who is this Anastasius the Librarian? Who is this person?
Anastasius the Librarian was a Pope of Rome for a short period of time until he was kicked out and replaced by a different Pope. But by force of arms, essentially, he was brought back into Rome and made into like the ghostwriter of the next three popes. I don't want to get the names wrong. Pope Stephen, Pope Adrian II, and Pope John VIII. All right. And so he's their ghostwriter. In fact, Pope Adrian II's family gets killed in a conspiracy that implicates Anastasius' family. He gets kicked out of Rome. He continues getting to write for Pope Adrian II, even though he's kicked out of Rome for killing his family. And then he's actually let back into Rome, which is fascinating because clearly, if you were calling the shots, you would never let the guy that killed your wife and child back into your employ. But it wasn't his call. It was the Frankish emperor's call in Italy, who was King Louis. So Anastasius is probably the most important intellectual mind of the Roman Church in the 9th century. I don't think any scholar would actually dispute this. And through using forgeries, making forgeries, through tactful omissions and quotations of previous councils and papal correspondence, he devised every single distinctive of pretty much the Vatican I papacy. Direct jurisdiction, papal nullification of canons, of councils, pretty much a slew of other things, but I'll just reduce it to that. And so we couldn't get here where Pope Francis, right, could say, this is how it is. Everyone has to accept it. It's not like the councils have to consent. The bishops and their synods need to consent to this. This is now the rule in the Roman Catholic Church. You couldn't get there with Anastasius devising that to be even a theological possibility. Now, he never thought it would go this way. I think his main concern was to pretty much strategize so St. Photius the Great in Constantinople couldn't have jurisdiction in the Balkans. So this was for totally different reasons. But intellectually, that's where it began. And that's why people need to read this book, because how did we get here? You're not going to read Pope explanations in the first millennium. How did we get here? Well, ironically, the first Pope explainer actually is Anastasius. It's in his letter to John the Deacon. So we actually see the first example of Pope explanation in history. We have the historical document. I quote it in this book. So where did this epistemology begin? This whole crazy way of thinking, where it wasn't just about the apostolic deposit of faith. It was about the person, the Pope. This began with Anastasius.
So my mind is going 1,000 miles per hour right now, Craig. Are you saying that?
I'm going to slow down.
Are you saying that this librarian, Anastasius the librarian, a pope who got kicked out, orchestrated the assassination of another pope's family for 3 popes after him, was the main writer for the Latin Church and the architect of the ideas that we're seeing in this document, that the Pope is the head of the whole church and the Pope can make new doctrines? Is that basically what you're saying?
Anastasius wasn't so crass saying the Pope can make new doctrines. The Pope was the final say of what was doctrinal. And so doctrinal development, right, where the Pope can make new doctrines, kind of really had to wait for Newman to be invented. Because Aquinas denied that. Everyone denied that until Newman. Newman pretty much invented that idea.
So Anastasius can be seen as the father of the idea that the Pope has primacy, the Pope is in charge, the Pope is the head of the church and can define, accept, or reject councils on his own.
Yes, yeah, that begins with Anastasius.
And you explain all that in your book.
Absolutely, and I explain piece by piece how did it get there. Because it wasn't actually a slow development in the West. The West was Orthodox until Anastasius, and it flipped like a switch. Because he was the genius and creative mind behind these ideas.
Wow. That's fascinating.
If you want to know how did we get to, if you're a traditional Roman Catholic, you go, how on earth did we get here? Well, I say start at year 0. Well, technically this book starts at year 33, right? I would start with this. This is definitely where you want to go if you want to say how we get here, because we have to diagnose, is this whole way of thinking that even makes this at all acceptable, is this apostolic? And if it's not, why are we even wasting our time doing this? I think that's a very basic thing.
Very good.
All right, so we're going to do some audience questions, and we have this from Ben. Gay couples are already blessed as persons every Mass during the general blessing, right? But, everyone, actually, it's individuals are blessed during these general blessings. They just happen to be a couple. We ask all gays to stand up and leave. The paranoia surrounding this document is ridiculous. And the answer is no, because a general blessings for the individuals to, go out, preach the gospel, live God-honoring lives. The difference is when a couple says, bless us as a couple, right? Now the intent of that blessing is relevant. Are you blessing us as a couple to, like I said, to not live together and then respectfully go to monasteries, right? Like what is the purpose of this blessing? That is relevant. This document does not allow that to be discerned. It actually requires that it not be discerned. So that'd be the difference, Ben. We have Ben saying it doesn't remotely meet the criteria of infallibility, yet the document is 100% accurate theological take. And here's Ben having his cake and eating it too. Thank you. We have this. If it did change anything, then why write it at all? All right. And I think his thing is, right, if this document wasn't innovative, why else would they have written it? Right. So I think that's more of a rhetorical point. You can
now, one answer that I'd have to Ben, and I appreciate his question, because he wants to hold to that traditional Catholic view He doesn't want to see change. But the question is, why does the document say that this is a change? Why does it say that this is an innovation? Why does it say we need to expand the understanding of blessings if there's nothing changing about blessings, as Ben would argue?
Okay, well, all right. We got this lost the set, so he put the hat back on. Yeah, to give it a visually interesting element. I don't know. Maybe I think we're like, I don't want to make anyone. I don't like when people put the Byzantine flag behind themselves, but I'm gonna have to do something. I might try to find that Russian army flag, which has Christ's very serious looking the icon made without hands on it, because at least I find that really cool. I don't know. This is just my house. I go where I could go. But yeah, I need to do something about this set to make it a little more visually appealing. We have this. Can the blessing be an exorcism? I mean, I don't see why not. Both of us want to, stop struggling with this. Can you help us not struggle with this? I mean, how do you think that should be approached, Mark?
Can the blessing be an exorcism?
Right, like maybe I bless you to go see an exorcist and get this taken care of.
I think that I think this is kind of a joking question here. I appreciate that, Mario. I think that the blessing is defined what it would be, where it's blessing the relationship, it's blessing it to grow, mature, blessing for dialogue in that relationship. I think it's a blessing of support. Exorcism is more trying to remove the demonic possession of the individual.
So we have this. Relativism is self-defeating as always. And thank you for saying this. That's why I will answer some questions later. This will prevent union because no one means what they say. Intent means nothing. That's a real problem.
So what if tomorrow they came out with a document saying, we want to join the Orthodox. We agree with everything the Orthodox say. We're not going to do these blessings, and we're also not going to say what we've said about the papal primacy or the filioque. Could we have a union, Craig?
Wouldn't work.
What would be your take on that? Why is that?
It wouldn't work as much
not
as
even
I
if
wanted
they
to
agree
work.
with everything.
Yeah, it's because their words are meaningless. I go, do you really mean it? Oh, of course we do. Okay, we're going to make all of you catechumens, and then we'll bring you to the church of baptism because you said you really want to be Orthodox. Right?
Not even if they just accept everything the Orthodox teaches and reject everything the Catholics teach, and the Pope does that, and all the bishops do that.
If they did, they would have no issue.
They'd
have no issue becoming catechumens. Right? And it's because I think this is way past like with the Novatianists who received the laying on of hands, or even like with the Uniates, which could be received that way. I'm well aware that the Russian Church has received probably even Latin Rite people with vesting and stuff, and I'm not, going to comment on the whether that was a really great idea or not. But if you were to bring in 1 billion people and they outnumber you, you better make sure they're all Catholics. Otherwise, the union's not possible. If they were sincere, they would understand. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of confusion unless we all get catechized. I would say the clergy first. And then the clergy have to catechize everyone else. It's a shame we're that far gone, but it would be no different, I hate to say it, than the governing body, the Jehovah's Witnesses, saying, all right, this is all nonsense. We're going to encourage everyone to become Orthodox. That's great, right? But we're not going to receive you as bishops. You're going to be catechumens, and we're going to make everyone else catechumens. So the reality is maybe Uniates in Western Ukraine, despite their issues, at least have enough distinctives which are Orthodox leaning where it could be workable, not without any issues, especially in the information age, but it could be workable.
Now, interestingly, Craig, the Union.
I do want to add one thing before I forget, because people don't understand this, because they just think of this in the realm of theory. When Imperial Russia was bringing Uniates back into the Russian Orthodox fold, those Uniates were at the same time persecuted, even though they're Uniates, by the Latin Rite, right? So they were much more distinctly Orthodox in that time than what we would see today. And so we have to look at the sort of historical reasons for why bringing those unions worked well, but if you were to instantly do it all today, we could have actually major problems.
Now, interestingly, the unions of Ukraine, the head bishop of their church has come out with a statement saying that this document does not apply to them, that it only applies to the Latin Catholic Church, not the Ukrainian Catholic Church. So they disagree with this document.
They do. They say it doesn't apply, but
it doesn't apply to their church, they say.
But in the end, that's just a local error from the papal way of thinking, right? The Pope's infallible, not Metropolitan Shevchuk or whatever his his title is. I forget. We see this, and this is why we need to catechize, make all the Roman Catholics catechumen if they convert in mass. We're never rejecting the filioque or the papacy. That's not happening. You have to be realistic, Craig. If there's a union of Catholic and Orthodox, which I hope will happen, there will be compromise. And that is the problem. Compromise sounds great, but you can't compromise on the truth. We can't compromise like with a document like this. There needs to be an actual change of heart that this is a wrong way of thinking. We need to approach this in the Orthodox manner.
I think in some ways this this commenter is correct. I don't think the whole Catholic Church is going to go through catechism class and become Orthodox. I think there can be further breakaways from the Orthodox Church where some bishops are led away or they put pressure on them and a part breaks off and joins the Catholic Church, similar to the Uniates. I think that is possible, but that wouldn't be the Orthodox Church. If they give up the creed that was given by the Holy Spirit, the 7 ecumenical councils said this is the fully defined truth that didn't have the filioque in it, and those councils that both East and West signed on to say if you change even one word of the creed, you have 4 councils saying it, the 3rd through the 7th. If you change one word, you are anathema. And that's because the creed, they call it the holy mathema. It's the divine equation, it's math. You can say, if you say this, this is correct. If you change one figure on one side of a math equation, it's not math, it's outside of math, it's anathema, outside of math. So if you don't change the filioque, if you're an Orthodox bishop and you go join the Catholics and you sign some intermediary creed, you would no longer be Orthodox, you would be a Uniate, basically.
All right, so we're going to have this, just a quick comment, Breaking Bad Pope, because all the meth lab references. I just had to pick out, like, you can't have irregular couples good, irregular unions bad, right? Make it make sense. I can't tell the difference. And absolutely, that's what a normal person would think. This is what Zed's saying. You can't have, meth labs good, meth labs making meth bad. It's the meth lab. That's what it does. You can't make something bad good. Zed says, Father James Martin publicly blessed a homosexual couple while they were holding hands. The photograph was uploaded to social media. Martin was boasting about it. Because again, as the document says, it's about strengthening those relationships and the interpersonal relations and stuff. So it's why, we shouldn't be surprised about it.
And Father James Martin is a close friend of the Pope, and he considers this an important step, but not the final step.
Oh, yeah, it's going to get worse. We have, yes, it's crazy when people pick Catholic on purpose. I'll actually push back and say, from a Protestant, like with a Protestant ethos, you go, everyone's wrong at a little bit of something, right? So you pick who you think's the most right. And I could see someone with, some lax moral views and, wrong patristic views. You could say, I think Roman Catholic's most right. So like I wouldn't say it's crazy. I would disagree on an intellectual basis. But I do think it's crazy if you actually buy into the Pope's explanation stuff, right? That's crazy. That's a cult way of thinking. It's not normal. We have this, the brother Trulia looking like Orthodox version of Raiden. He's talking about my hat. I think in Mortal Kombat, you could throw the hat and cut your head off. So maybe it's one of those things. There you go. Good Mortal Kombat reference. We have Shame is saying, how can this be a step towards same-sex marriage when it explicitly says the opposite? And I agree from Seamus's vantage point, this isn't, but it's about normalizing same-sex marriage in all but name. And that clearly, like I said, is something that is unacceptable. If we're talking about faith and morals, I don't see how that's something you could accept. We have this from Steve. Can I get an autographed copy of your book? Rise Fall of the Papacy. Again, you really want to find out how the Roman train fell off the rails and precisely when it was on the rails, how it operated. I recommend this book. The link is below in the info bar. It's made by Uncut Mountain Press. And I bring that all up because the only way you're going to get it signed is by going to the Uncut Mountain Conference in Alabama on the 8th Ecumenical Council. So because I will be there physically, and if you bring your book, if you really want it signed, I will sign it. I don't think it'll be worth any more money with my signature. So there you go. We have this. Do you think this diabolical document is a major setback for Catholic and Orthodox relations? Absolutely, Jason, because it only brings more to bear, makes clearer rather what I said before, is that the postmodernism and relativism of the Roman Catholic Church makes any of their assurances completely useless, because clearly their ethos is so far from the apostolic faith that even if they said the right things, you couldn't believe it at this juncture. You know, it's sadly that's where we are right now. We have Seamus saying, two men approach their priests in a private setting to ask for a blessing so they can repair their brokenness. How is that wrong? Yeah, they're saying, like I said 1,000 times, they're the show Seamus. So they go to the priest saying, you know, we ask your blessing to figure out a way for us to get, you know, whether it's treatment or to get separate apartments and to break this up. Why wouldn't they be blessed for that? But again, the individuals would be blessed in them seeking to break apart the couple, right? That's the issue. The document actually explicitly disputes that by blessing the coupling. So, you know, Seamus is a major Kobo, no offense. He's, you know, otherwise a great viewer of this channel and very nice. But clearly, you know, he's trying to make this document acceptable, which it could be. A. Elliot is saying, Kung Lao, not Raiden. I thought Raiden wore the hat. I don't know. Well, I guess we would have to Google who looks like what. All right. John Anon says, can you talk about the 8th Ecumenical Council and the upcoming conference? I'll just say very brief notes. The whole Pentarchy, the Pope, and all the other patriarchates and their synods accepted the 8th Council. We have the synodical letter of Pope John VIII. We have the fact that the Roman Synod has the canons of the 8th Council in their canon law. So clearly it was accepted by all the synods. The upcoming conference will be talking about this and the overall ethos of this council, because there's ramifications of what do we deal with a ecumenical council that all the synods, including Rome, accepted, which called into question the filioque and called into question papal supremacy. It called into question both. You can read the first canon. So that will be the conference will be bringing to America the what's it called? The commemoration of the 8th Council and the veneration of that council. So you get to take part in a little religious service where the council will be venerated and you get to hang out with like-minded people. It is a ton of fun. It's what a dork like me would want to go on vacation doing. So I recommend you go to Uncut Mountain Press and check that out. Sign up for the conference. It'd be great to see you there. Now,
Craig, I thought there were only 7 ecumenical councils. What do you mean the 8th?
The 8th? Well, again, in the 7th council, it mentions in the 6th session that an ecumenical council has the reception of all the synods. And so this council in 879-880 meets the criteria of what ecumenical council says is an ecumenical council. And so it is, on a technical basis, an ecumenical council, and it has been by pan-Orthodox councils labeled as such as the Council of Constantinople 1848. But there is a sense where we can also speak strictly of the 7 ecumenical councils, because the same Constantinopolitan Council in 1848 also does that, by the way. So if you see a saint saying 7 ecumenical councils, that's because those are the 7 key most important ecumenical councils. But there is still an 8th ecumenical council.
So those are the 7 that the 8th recognized. They wouldn't be a 7 without the 8th saying the 7th is the 7th.
Now I want to be careful with my response. I'm going to give my own personal intellectual response. I am not a bishop or cleric, and I've heard different rationale, but I don't believe that rationale of the ecumenical council is actually canonical. It's not in the councils, that only a council recognizes an ecumenical council. I think that's a speculation of sorts, and it creates a sort of thing where a council isn't ecumenical when it actually occurred, because you got to wait for the next ecumenical council to make it ecumenical. So I think it is definitely a epistemic guarantee a council's ecumenical, right? Like you could have no doubt a council's ecumenical because the ecumenical council has declared it such, but that is not the vehicle in which, of the sole vehicle in which we would recognize it. It'd be the synods receiving, all the synods receiving the council, and that includes Rome.
Gotcha.
So, but that will be talked about during the conference, by the way. There'll be very interesting stuff from bishops in that conference. So that's something that I really hope people pay attention to. We have this. How would you view the large descent that is now taking place? Good question, Savardis. I view the descent in the among the Roman Catholic faithful is the basic Christian impetus that is healthy, which is always in a family. It's not just someone says something and everyone unthinkingly responds. Consensus requires a willful acceptance of what's occurring, and if it's not willful, what you're seeing is the science of consensus working and perhaps purging out what's in error. So Roman Catholicism created an epistemology, a theory of working, that people's opinion don't matter. It's just the Pope, solo Pope. But the reality is, in the Orthodox Church, like what we've seen with the baptism, they had their baptizing children with a child with gay parents, where the church organically, including the Constantinople Synod, rejected this as not something we do. So dissent is a healthy example of how consensus works. Now, I don't want my words twisted. What I'm not telling people is to resist their bishops and to think this is a democracy, a direct democracy, and what we say is equal and everything matters. But dissent is part of consensus. It's in Apostolic Canon 34. The guardians of the faith are the people, as the Council of Constantinople 1848 states. So there is a healthy element to it as well. We have this. During your interview with the other Paul on the papacy about how to apply facts over words to distinguish modern day dissent from Rome versus dissent from it in antiquity to see what was actually believed. Well, and I think that's a good point, Savardis. I think this is more of a point, but it's sort of like him saying, listen, we can see what the Roman Catholic faithful actually believe. They're dissenting against it, but I would say, Savardis, are they dissenting to the point where they're going to depose the Pope? Are they dissenting to the point where they're deposing the priests that are doing these things? I would actually believe that this dissent is fake dissent. Let me broaden this a little bit. You'll see people that say they're Republicans listening to like talk radio and stuff go, oh, I'm against I don't want to get taken down. I'm against Biden doing this, Biden doing that. But what are they doing about it? Nothing. They're sitting on their butt and saying they're unhappy. Are they really against it? But how about the Black Lives Matter people that will burn down your house? Well, clearly they're against something. Their actions betray they really mean it when they say they're going to do something. So to believe facts rather than words, I think sometimes people spewing dissent are just words. The facts are what they do with that dissent, right? Do they stop giving their money to the point where the church has to actually change what they're doing? Do they stop showing up? Do they convert to orthodoxy? Those are facts, my friend. Those are facts. I think you agree, but maybe you're just trying to tease that out of me. We see Zed. How can reconciliation happen between the 5 patriarchs unless the See of Rome repents of their errors? Absolutely. We would need to see actual repentance. Reconciliation requires repentance. The prodigal son reconciled with his father by repenting, but more wasn't asked of him than repentance. Zane says, I'd be entertained to see a Lofton versus Tim Gordon debate on this. You said that would never happen, but I think both like money. And so maybe it could happen. So hopefully they could make it happen. It would be actually very entertaining. So let's do it. I will host it, or I can moderate it from I'll be a nice guy behavior if you want. I don't know why. I'd say have Timothy Flanders moderate it or something. There's money to be had. They're stupid not to do it. They're stupid not to do it. All right. And on that note, Jonah says, if they need much more money, why did they make the printer press to make more paper money? There you go. And so, Mark, I'm really grateful for your analysis. You putting together these notes for us. Any plugs would you like to make?
Any what?
Plugs. You want to plug anyone?
Well, I just want to say it's been an honor to have me on your show. I think the conference coming up is going to be a great conference, and I appreciate all the audience responses here.
Well, it's so the plug is for the audience. It's very nice of you to do. And I will plug the book again, Rise Fall the Papacy. This has blessed you. You could buy this book. You know, people give money for absolutely nothing. You get a lot of answers and useful things from the book. You can also go, if you really want to do something godly, is because that's, well, it's godly to learn more about God, but something profoundly godly would be to give alms, you know, whether it be Jordanville, Holy Trinity Monastery, some of the stayed open during COVID. You could go also to orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate and find out the wiring instructions to give a lot of money to Cambodia. You can use the PayPal to give a little money to the churches in Cambodia. Please support the evangelism work. What's the point of all of this if we don't care about spreading the gospel? There's no point of this at all. You're just, it's just wisdom and puffing your head up if you are not applying your faith to live the Christian life. So please give alms, do the right thing. It doesn't have to be mine thing, but I'm reminding you, you better do something to draw close to God, and he will draw close to you.
Craig, I did read that book. I did read your book, The Rise and Fall of the Papacy. I've read about 10 books on Catholicism versus Orthodox relations and the history of the Catholic Church. And I learned so much from your book that I didn't find in any of the other ones. It was really fascinating.
It's I'm grateful for you saying that because, yeah, I think seeing is believing. This is it's not the longest book in the world. But you know what? When you don't have to take an epistemology that doesn't exist in church history, you could get a lot of points and cover a lot of sources without using a lot of space per se. And so I do think people would read this book and realize, yes, this is a must read and it has a lot of information they would not get anywhere else. And I see this from Zane. I've got Craig's book, but I'd buy it as a hardcover. I'm too cheap to do that. But good for you, Zane. Maybe they'll make the hardcover version for you. And there's a potential for the audiobook. So we will do that. And endorsing books, how about the Bible? Absolutely, but that's for free. I use BibleGateway.com. I'll also use Interlinear Septuagint when I want to read the Old Testament and get really into nitty gritty. BibleHub.com for Interlinear, for Hebrew and for Greek. So definitely check those out. They're totally free. So there you go. Thank you, Jonas. So other than that, Mark, thank you so much for saying something nice about my book. I thank the audience, and I will end this show as an all them by quoting Jesus' rock, fight to death for the truth. And the Lord God will fight for you. God bless you. Have a great day.